The stagecoach rattled into Silver Creek, Montana territory on a blistering July afternoon in 1876, and Amelia Hartford knew the moment she stepped down onto the dusty street that she had made a terrible mistake agreeing to this arrangement. The town sprawled before her like a collection of wooden boxes scattered by an indifferent hand, buildings weathered gray by mountain winds and harsh winters. Men in dusty work clothes paused their conversations to stare as she descended from the coach, and Amelia felt their eyes trace over her form with the kind of assessment that made her skin prickle with shame. She was a big woman, tall and broad-shouldered, with generous curves that strained against the seams of her traveling dress, despite her best efforts to disguise them beneath layers of fabric. At 23 years old, she had long ago accepted that she would never possess the delicate, willowy frame that society deemed beautiful, but acceptance did not make the stairs any easier to bear. Her intended husband, Gerald Pemberton, stood waiting near the general store, his thin frame draped in a suit that looked expensive but ill-fitting. He was exactly as his letters had described, prosperous, educated, refined. What the letters had failed to mention was the immediate look of disappointment that crossed his pale features when he took in her appearance. "Miss Hartford," he said, his voice carefully neutral as he extended a hand that felt limp and cold in her grasp. "I trust your journey was pleasant." "Long," Amelia replied, smoothing her skirts with her free hand, "but uneventful, thank you." Gerald's eyes flickered over her again, and she saw him swallow hard. "Yes, well, I've arranged for us to dine at the Silver Creek Hotel this evening. A sort of welcoming celebration, if you will. The mayor and several prominent citizens will be joining us." Amelia's stomach dropped. A public dinner, with strangers watching her eat, judging every bite she took. "That is very kind, but perhaps we might postpone such a gathering until I have had time to rest and refresh myself from the journey." "Nonsense," Gerald said, but there was something brittle in his smile. "I have been telling everyone about your arrival. They are eager to meet you." She knew what he really meant. He wanted to show her off, to prove to the town that he had secured a bride from back east, someone educated and cultured. What he had not anticipated was that she would be fat, and now he needed witnesses to confirm that he had not been deceived, that she had indeed presented herself honestly in her correspondence. The remainder of the afternoon passed in a blur of introductions and forced pleasantries, as Gerald showed her to the small house he had prepared for their married life. It was tidy and well-appointed, but Amelia could barely focus on the details. Her mind kept circling back to the impending dinner, imagining the whispers and sideways glances she would endure. By the time evening approached, her anxiety had transformed into a tight knot in her chest. She changed into her best dress, a deep blue silk that she had commissioned specifically for meeting her new husband. The dressmaker back in Boston had done her best, but there was no hiding Amelia's size, only attempting to flatter it. The bodice fit snugly across her full bosom, and the skirts fell in what she hoped were graceful lines over her wide hips. Gerald knocked on the bedroom door at precisely 6 o'clock. When she emerged, she watched his jaw tighten almost imperceptibly before he offered his arm. The Silver Creek Hotel dining room was the finest establishment the town had to offer, which meant clean tablecloths and real china rather than tin plates. A long table had been set for 12, and most of the seats were already occupied when they arrived. Amelia recognized the mayor from earlier, along with a man Gerald introduced as the bank president, a couple who owned the dry goods store, and several others whose names immediately fled her anxious mind. The only seat available for her was in the very center of the table, where she would be visible to everyone. Gerald pulled out her chair with exaggerated courtesy, and Amelia sank into it, acutely aware of how the chair creaked under her weight. The first course arrived moments later, a rich beef soup with vegetables. Around her, conversation flowed about mining prospects and railroad expansion, but Amelia barely heard it. She stared at her bowl, painfully conscious of every eye that drifted toward her. When she finally lifted her spoon, she took the smallest possible sip, terrified of appearing greedy or uncouth. "You must be famished after your journey, Miss Hartford," the mayor's wife said from across the table. Her voice was pleasant enough, but her eyes were sharp and assessing. "Please do not stand on ceremony." "I'm quite satisfied, thank you," Amelia murmured, setting her spoon down after only 2 bites. The second course was fried chicken with potatoes and gravy, the kind of hearty fare that Amelia normally loved. But with Gerald sitting stiffly beside her and the other diners making polite small talk while watching her from the corners of their eyes, she could barely bring herself to touch it. She cut a tiny piece of chicken and ate it with agonizing slowness, chewing far longer than necessary. "Is the food not to your liking?" Gerald asked quietly, his voice holding an edge of irritation. "It is lovely," Amelia said. "I'm simply not very hungry." This was a lie. She was ravenous after the long journey, her stomach growling in protest at being denied the meal spread before her. But the thought of eating normally, of taking the portions she wanted and enjoying them with genuine appetite, filled her with such mortification that she would rather starve. She made it through the main course by pushing food around her plate and taking occasional bites so small they could barely be called such. Dessert was apple pie with cream, and Amelia declined altogether, claiming she was too full. "Surely you can manage a small slice," the mayor insisted jovially. "Mrs. Patterson makes the best pie in the territory." "I truly cannot," Amelia said, her cheeks burning. She could feel Gerald's displeasure radiating from beside her like heat from a stove. When the interminable dinner finally ended, Gerald escorted her back to the house in stiff silence. Only when they were inside did he speak. "That was embarrassing," he said bluntly. "I invite prominent citizens to welcome you, and you sit there picking at your food like a bird. What must they think?" Amelia stared at him, stunned. "I apologize. I was nervous and not feeling entirely well after the journey." "You made me look foolish," Gerald continued, pacing the small parlor. "I have spent weeks telling everyone about the refined young woman I was bringing from Boston, and you could not even make polite conversation or show proper appreciation for the meal." The unfairness of it sparked something hot and angry in Amelia's chest. "You wanted me to eat more. You, who looked at me this afternoon like I was a prize mare that had gone lame." "I saw your disappointment, Gerald. I saw how you looked at my size and regretted your decision to send for me." Gerald's face flushed. "I did not say that." "You did not need to," Amelia said quietly. "It was written plainly on your face, and at dinner, every time I reached for my fork. And I could feel you judging me, wondering if I would humiliate you by eating too much. So forgive me for erring on the side of caution." They stood in tense silence, the truth of their situation settling around them like dust. Finally, Gerald sighed. "Perhaps we were both hasty in this arrangement. You should retire. We will discuss our future in the morning." Amelia went to the small bedroom with her heart heavy and her stomach achingly empty. She had traveled 2,000 miles to marry a man who was ashamed of her, to live in a town where she would forever be the subject of gossip and speculation. Lying in the unfamiliar bed, she allowed herself to cry quietly into the pillow, mourning not just this failed match, but all the years of shame and restriction that had led her to this moment. She must have eventually fallen asleep, because she woke to early morning light filtering through the curtains and the sound of male voices in the parlor. One was Gerald's clipped Eastern accent. The other was deeper, rougher, with a kind of resonance that seemed to come from a broad chest. Amelia rose and dressed quickly, then crept to the door to listen. "I need someone to guide me up to the high country," the unfamiliar voice was saying. "I am willing to pay well, but I need to leave within the week." "I am afraid I cannot help you," Gerald replied. "I'm a businessman, not a guide. You want Jonas Bridger. He has a cabin about 5 miles north of town, up near Copper Ridge. I have already been to Bridger's place. He is gone, headed to Wyoming on a job. The man at the livery said you might know of other guides." There was a pause. "There is Thomas Graywolf, but he left town 3 days ago. I honestly cannot think of anyone else available on such short notice." "Damn," the stranger muttered. Then, "Pardon my language." Amelia heard footsteps approaching the bedroom door and quickly stepped back. Gerald opened it without knocking. "You're awake. Good. We need to talk." But before he could continue, the other man appeared behind him, and Amelia forgot to breathe. He was enormous, not fat, but powerfully built, with shoulders that seemed to fill the doorway and arms that strained the fabric of his worn cotton shirt. His hair was dark brown and fell past his shoulders, tied back with a leather cord, and his face was all hard angles, softened only slightly by a neatly trimmed beard. But it was his eyes that captured her attention. A startling light brown, almost amber, that seemed to see straight through her. "Forgive the intrusion, miss," he said, and that deep voice sent an unexpected shiver down her spine. "I was just leaving." "This is Silas MacKenna," Gerald said dismissively. He was asking about guides. "Silas, this is Miss Amelia Hartford, my betrothed." The hesitation before the word was slight but noticeable. Silas's eyes flickered between them, and Amelia had the uncomfortable feeling that he could read the entire situation as clearly as if it were written in ink. "Pleased to meet you, Miss Hartford," Silas said, touching the brim of his worn hat. Then he turned to Gerald. "I appreciate your time. If you think of anyone, I will be at the boarding house for the next few days." After he left, Gerald closed the door and turned to Amelia with an expression of grim determination. "I've been thinking about our situation all night," he began. "I believe we should give ourselves a trial period before committing to marriage, say 2 weeks. During that time, we can assess whether we are truly suited to one another." Amelia understood perfectly. He wanted an escape route, a way to send her back east without outright jilting her. "I see. And what would such a trial period entail?" "You would continue to stay here, of course. We would appear together in public occasionally. But we would not rush into marriage until we are certain." Pride warred with practicality in Amelia's chest. She had no money to return home, and even if she did, what awaited her there? Her parents had died 2 years ago, and she'd been living with a disapproving aunt who had made it clear that Amelia was a burden. This match had been her chance at independence, at building a life of her own. "Very well," she said quietly. 2 weeks. Gerald nodded, clearly relieved. "Excellent. I have business to attend to today, but perhaps we could take a walk together this evening, show the town that we are settling in well." After he left, Amelia sat on the edge of the bed and tried not to feel utterly defeated. Her stomach growled loudly, reminding her that she had barely eaten since yesterday's breakfast on the stage. But the thought of going to the hotel dining room or even the general store for supplies filled her with dread. How could she face those people again after last night? Instead, she spent the day organizing her belongings and exploring the small house. It was well built and comfortable, stocked with everything necessary for housekeeping. In the pantry, she found flour, sugar, coffee, and a few tins of preserves, but nothing substantial for a meal. Her stomach continued to protest, but she ignored it. By mid-afternoon, hunger had given way to lightheadedness. Amelia finally forced herself to make a piece of toast with butter, eating it quickly while standing at the kitchen counter, as if speed and privacy could somehow make it less shameful. Gerald returned at sunset and took her on the promised walk through town. It was excruciating. Everyone they passed stared and whispered. Gerald maintained a brittle smile and made awkward introductions, but Amelia could feel his discomfort in the stiff way he held his arm, in the careful distance he maintained between them. They passed the hotel just as the dinner hour was beginning, and the smell of roasting meat made Amelia's mouth water despite herself. Gerald glanced at her. "Would you like to dine here this evening? Perhaps make a better impression than last night?" The suggestion felt like a test, and a criticism rolled into one. "I am not very hungry," Amelia lied. "Perhaps we could simply return home?" Gerald's expression tightened, but he nodded. "As you wish." That night, alone in her room while Gerald worked at his desk in the parlor, Amelia allowed herself to cry again. Not just from hunger, though her empty stomach ached, but from the crushing loneliness of her situation. She was trapped between 2 impossible choices: eating normally and confirming everyone's worst assumptions about her, or starving herself to maintain some shred of dignity. The next few days fell into a miserable pattern. Gerald left early for his business affairs and returned in the evening to escort her on brief, awkward walks through town. Amelia barely ate, subsisting on toast and weak tea when she was alone. The hunger became a constant companion, gnawing at her insides and making her weak and dizzy. On the 4th day, Gerald announced at breakfast that he had business in a neighboring town and would be gone for 2 nights. "Will you be all right on your own?" he asked, and Amelia could hear the hope in his voice that she would say yes. "Of course," she assured him. "I will be perfectly fine." After he left, the house felt simultaneously more peaceful and more isolating. Amelia made herself a proper meal for the first time in days: eggs and bacon and fried potatoes. She ate it at the kitchen table with the curtains drawn, savoring every bite in guilty privacy. The food helped, restoring some of her strength, but it did nothing for the ache of loneliness. The next morning, desperate for something to occupy her mind, Amelia decided to explore the area around the house. She packed a small basket with bread and cheese and set out, following a trail that led up into the foothills beyond town. The Montana landscape was different from anything she had known in Boston, vast and wild, with mountains rising like ancient sentinels in the distance. The air smelled of pine and sage, and the sky stretched overhead in an endless blue dome. Despite her circumstances, Amelia felt something in her chest loosen slightly as she walked. She had been following the trail for nearly an hour when she rounded a bend and nearly collided with Silas MacKenna. He was leading a large bay horse loaded with supplies, clearly heading away from town. When he saw her, he stopped and touched his hat in greeting. "Miss Hartford, you're a long way from town." "I was just taking a walk," Amelia said, suddenly self-conscious. This close, he was even larger than she remembered, tall enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. His shirt was open at the collar, revealing a triangle of tanned skin and dark hair, and his forearms, visible where he had rolled up his sleeves, were corded with muscle. "Alone?" His eyebrows rose slightly. "These hills can be dangerous for someone unfamiliar with them. Mountain lions, bears, rough terrain." "I'm only going a short distance," Amelia said, though in truth she had not really considered where she was going. "I will turn back soon." Silas studied her for a long moment, those amber eyes seeming to see more than she wanted to reveal. "You look pale. Are you feeling well?" "I'm perfectly fine," Amelia said automatically, but even as the words left her mouth, the world tilted sideways. She had stood too quickly after sitting on a rock to catch her breath, and the combination of altitude, exertion, and days of inadequate food suddenly caught up with her. Strong hands caught her before she hit the ground. Silas lifted her as easily as if she weighed nothing, which was so far from the truth that it shocked her back to awareness. "Put me down," she gasped. "I am too heavy. You will hurt yourself." Silas actually laughed, a low rumble in his chest that she could feel where he held her. "Miss Hartford, I carry deer carcasses heavier than you up and down these mountains. You are not going to hurt me." He set her gently on a fallen log and crouched before her, studying her face with a concern that made something in Amelia's chest twist painfully. When was the last time someone had looked at her with genuine care? "When did you last eat a proper meal?" he asked quietly. The kindness in his voice was her undoing. To her horror, tears spilled over and ran down her cheeks. "I'm sorry. This is so foolish. I'm perfectly fine. I just need a moment." "You are not fine," Silas said firmly. He opened one of the packs on his horse and pulled out a canteen and what looked like jerky wrapped in cloth. "Here, drink first, then eat." Amelia wanted to refuse, but her body betrayed her. She took the canteen with shaking hands and drank deeply, the cool water soothing her parched throat. Then, because he was watching her with those steady eyes that seemed to demand honesty, she took the jerky and ate it. "More," Silas said, pulling out a wrapped bundle that proved to be bread and dried apples. "Do not stop until you have eaten at least half of that." "I cannot take your supplies," Amelia protested weakly. "You can and you will," Silas said. "I have plenty. Now eat." There was something in his voice, a note of command softened by concern, that made it impossible to refuse. Amelia ate, and with each bite, the fog in her head cleared a little. She had not realized how badly the hunger had affected her until now, when food was restoring her. Silas waited patiently, occasionally handing her the canteen. When she finally stopped, having consumed more than she intended, she felt almost human again. "Thank you," she said quietly. "I do not know what to say. You must think me completely foolish." "I think you have been starving yourself," Silas said bluntly, "and I am trying to understand why a grown woman would do such a thing." Amelia looked away, unable to meet his eyes. "It is complicated. I have time." She should not confide in this stranger. It was wildly inappropriate, but something about his calm, steady presence made the words spill out before she could stop them. "Gerald was disappointed when he saw me," she said quietly. "I am not what he expected. Too large, too plain. At the dinner that first night, I could feel everyone staring, judging. I thought if I ate less, if I tried to be smaller, perhaps he would be less ashamed. But it does not matter, does it? I cannot change what I am." Silas was quiet for a long moment. When Amelia finally gathered the courage to look at him, his expression was thunderous. "Gerald Pemberton is a fool," he said flatly. "And those people at that dinner are small-minded gossips with nothing better to do than judge others. You're going to make yourself sick trying to please them." "What else am I supposed to do?" Amelia asked, and hated how her voice broke. "I have nowhere else to go, no family, no prospects. This arrangement, disappointing as it is all I have." Silas stood and paced a few steps away, his hands clenched into fists. When he turned back, his jaw was tight. "You deserve better than a man who makes you feel ashamed of yourself, better than a town full of narrow-minded hypocrites." "Perhaps," Amelia said, "but better is not always an option." They stood in silence for a moment, the mountain wind rustling through the pines around them. Finally, Silas came back and crouched in front of her again. "I have a proposition for you," he said. "It is probably improper, and you are well within your rights to refuse. But hear me out." Amelia nodded warily. "I was preparing to head up to my cabin in the high country for the summer. It is about a day's ride from here, remote and isolated. I go there to trap and hunt to get away from people in towns. I was supposed to have a guide, but that fell through." He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "Come with me, as my cook and housekeeper. I will pay you wages, and you will have time and space away from that man and his expectations. Time to think about what you really want." Amelia stared at him. "You want me to go into the wilderness with you? Alone? That would be completely scandalous." "Probably," Silas agreed. "But who would know? Gerald is out of town. We could leave a note saying you needed time to think and went to stay with a friend. By the time he returns and figures out that there is no friend, we will be long gone. You stay the summer, earn some money, and come back in the fall if you want to. Or do not come back at all. Use the wages to start over somewhere else." It was insane. Completely, utterly insane. And yet, as Amelia looked into Silas's earnest eyes, she felt a spark of something she had not experienced in years. Hope. "Why would you do this for me?" she asked. "You do not even know me." Silas was quiet for a moment. "My mother was a big woman," he said finally. "Strong and capable and kind. My father loved her fiercely, never made her feel like she was anything less than beautiful. But when he died, the people in town treated her differently, made her feel ashamed of taking up space, of existing. She stopped eating in public, stopped going to church, stopped living in any real way. By the time I was grown enough to take care of her properly, she had wasted away to nothing, trying to be small enough to please people who would never be pleased." He met Amelia's eyes. "I will not stand by and watch another woman destroy herself for the comfort of small-minded fools." Amelia felt tears prick her eyes again, but these were different. "I'm sorry about your mother." "So am I." Silas stood and offered her his hand. "So, what do you say? Will you take a chance on summer in the mountains with a stranger, or go back to slow starvation in that house?" Amelia looked at his outstretched hand, broad-palmed and calloused from hard work. This was crazy, reckless, completely unlike anything she had ever done in her careful, circumspect life. She took his hand and let him pull her to her feet. "I must be losing my mind," she said. "But yes, I will come with you." Silas's face broke into a smile that transformed his stern features, making him look younger and infinitely more approachable. "Good. We leave at dawn tomorrow. Pack light, just essentials. I have supplies enough for both of us." They walked back to town together, Silas leading his horse and matching his long stride to her shorter one. At the edge of Silver Creek, he stopped. "I will come for you before sunrise," he said. "Be ready." That night, Amelia barely slept. She packed and repacked a small carpet bag with her most practical clothes, a few personal items, and the little bit of money she had saved. She wrote a note to Gerald, keeping it vague. She needed time to think, was staying with a friend she had met, would contact him in a few weeks. It was not quite a lie, but it was not quite the truth either. When the knock came at the door, in the pre-dawn darkness, Amelia's heart was pounding so hard she thought it might burst from her chest. She grabbed her bag, left the note on the kitchen table, and slipped out into the cool morning air. Silas was waiting with 2 horses, his big bay, and a smaller roan mare. "This is Rosie," he said, indicating the mare. "She has an easy gait and a calm temperament. Have you ridden before?" "Some," Amelia said, though it had been years. "I may be a bit rusty." "We will take it slow," Silas assured her. He helped her into the saddle, his hands steady and impersonal, and Amelia was grateful for the darkness that hid her blush. They rode out of Silver Creek as the eastern sky began to lighten, heading north into the mountains. For the first few hours, Amelia was too nervous to speak, certain that at any moment someone would spot them and raise an alarm. But as the town disappeared behind them and the trail wound higher into pine-covered slopes, some of her tension eased. Silas proved to be good company, pointing out landmarks and wildlife, sharing stories about the mountains in that deep, rumbling voice. He did not press her with questions or make awkward conversation, simply accepted her presence as naturally as if they had known each other for years. They stopped around midday beside a rushing creek. Silas unpacked bread, cheese, and dried meat, laying it out on a flat rock like a feast. "Eat," he said simply. "All you want. No one here to judge you but the trees, and they do not care." Amelia hesitated, old habits dying hard. But the morning's ride had left her genuinely hungry, and the food looked delicious. She took a modest portion and began to eat. "More," Silas said, pushing the bread toward her. "You are still recovering from days of barely eating. Your body needs fuel." "I do not want to take more than my share," Amelia protested. Silas fixed her with a stern look. "Amelia, I am going to be very clear with you. Part of our agreement, if you are working for me, is that you maintain your health and strength. That means eating proper meals. I need a housekeeper who has the energy to work, not someone who is weak from hunger. So please, eat what you need." The practicality of it, framing eating as a job requirement rather than a personal failing, made it somehow easier. Amelia took more bread and cheese, and when Silas pulled out apples and offered her one, she accepted without guilt. After the meal, they rested for a bit before continuing. The afternoon ride was more challenging as the trail grew steeper and narrower, winding through dense forest and across rocky slopes. Amelia's muscles, unused to riding, began to ache, but she gritted her teeth and kept going. As the sun began to sink toward the western peaks, they emerged into a high meadow dotted with wildflowers. And there, nestled against the edge of the tree line with a backdrop of soaring mountains, stood a log cabin. It was larger than Amelia had expected, solidly built with a wide porch and real glass windows. Smoke curled from the stone chimney, and she could see a vegetable garden plot beside the house, currently overgrown with weeds. "You have been here recently?" she asked, noting the smoke. "I came up 2 days ago to air the place out and get the basics set up," Silas explained. "Been planning this trip for weeks." He helped her down from the horse, and Amelia's legs nearly buckled when her feet hit the ground. Silas caught her elbow, steadying her. "Sorry," she gasped. "I'm more out of practice than I thought." "You did well for your first long ride in years," Silas said. "Come inside and rest while I tend the horses." The cabin's interior was simple but comfortable. One large room that served as kitchen and living area, with a fireplace on one wall and a sturdy table and chairs in the center. A ladder led to a loft, and there was a separate small bedroom on the ground floor. Everything was scrupulously clean, if a bit dusty from disuse. Amelia sank into one of the chairs, her legs trembling with exhaustion. Through the window, she could see Silas tending to the horses with efficient, practiced movements. In the fading light, he looked like something out of a storybook, the lone mountain man, strong and self-sufficient, perfectly at home in the wilderness. What had she done, running off with this stranger? If anyone in Silver Creek discovered the truth, her reputation would be utterly ruined. Not that it had been particularly intact to begin with, she thought wryly. Silas came in carrying both their bags and a load of firewood. "You should take the bedroom," he said. "I will sleep in the loft." "Are you certain it is your cabin?" "I am certain. The bedroom has a proper door for privacy, and the bed is more comfortable." He set her bag inside the small room, then began building up the fire. "I am going to make dinner. You just rest." Amelia wanted to protest, to insist on helping, but her body had other ideas. She moved to the bedroom, which contained a simple bed frame with what looked like a recently aired feather mattress, a small dresser, and a washstand. Someone, presumably Silas, had even put fresh linens on the bed. She sank onto the mattress with a groan of relief, intending to rest for just a moment. The next thing she knew, Silas was gently shaking her shoulder. "Dinner is ready," he said quietly. Amelia sat up groggily. Full darkness had fallen outside, and the cabin was warm and bright with firelight. The smell of cooking food made her stomach growl audibly. Silas had set the table with 2 plates piled high with fried trout, fried potatoes, and beans. There was also a pan of cornbread, still steaming, and a pot of coffee. "I caught the trout this morning," Silas said, taking a seat. "Hope you like fish." "It smells wonderful," Amelia said honestly. And it did, but the old familiar anxiety crept in as she looked at her plate. It was so much food. What would he think if she ate it all? As if reading her mind, Silas said, "And I made plenty, so eat as much as you want. If you cannot finish it all, that is fine too. But I want you to eat until you are actually full, not until you think you should stop. Understand?" Amelia nodded and picked up her fork. The first bite of trout was a revelation, perfectly seasoned, crispy on the outside and tender within. She took another bite, then another. Then, the potatoes were good too, and the cornbread was the best she had ever tasted, slightly sweet and crumbly. Silas ate steadily, focused on his own meal, not watching her. Somehow that made it easier. Amelia ate half her plate, then paused. "More coffee?" Silas asked, reaching for the pot. "Please." She held out her cup, then, feeling bold, took another piece of cornbread. "It is good, right?" Silas said with obvious pride. "My mother's recipe. The secret is a bit of honey in the batter." "It is delicious," Amelia said. And it was, and she was eating it, and the world had not ended. In fact, Silas looked pleased that she was enjoying the food he had prepared. By the time she finally set down her fork, Amelia had eaten more than she had in days, and her stomach felt pleasantly full rather than achingly empty. Silas smiled at her. "Better?" "Much," Amelia admitted. "Thank you for everything. This whole situation is so strange, but you have been nothing but kind." "You are welcome." Silas began clearing the plates. "We have a few ground rules we should probably discuss now that we are here. First, I meant what I said about eating properly. 3 meals a day, minimum. I do a lot of physical work up here, and I need substantial meals. I expect you to eat the same things I eat, in reasonable portions. No more starving yourself. Agreed?" Amelia nodded. "Agreed." "Second, your job is to help with cooking, cleaning, and maintaining the cabin and garden. I will handle the hunting, fishing, and heavier outdoor work. We will both pull our weight, but neither of us is a servant to the other. Fair?" "Fair." "Third, if at any point you feel uncomfortable or want to leave, you say so. I will take you back to town, no questions asked, and pay you for the time you worked. Your presence here is entirely voluntary." "I understand." Silas hesitated, then said, "And fourth, for what it is worth, I give you my word as a gentleman that I will not take advantage of this situation in any improper way. You are safe here." Something in Amelia's chest loosened at those words. She had not fully realized how much that fear had been lurking in the back of her mind. "Thank you. I believe you." They finished cleaning up the dinner dishes together, moving around the kitchen in companionable silence. When everything was put away, Silas banked the fire and bid her good night. Amelia retreated to the small bedroom and changed into her nightgown, then slipped between the clean sheets. Through the wall, she could hear Silas moving about in the main room, the creak of the ladder as he climbed to the loft. She should have been terrified, alone in the wilderness with a man she barely knew. Instead, for the first time in weeks, Amelia felt safe. She fell asleep to the sound of the wind in the pines and slept dreamlessly until morning. The next few days established a routine. Amelia woke at dawn to find Silas already up, starting the fire and making coffee. She would dress and help prepare breakfast, usually eggs from the few chickens that scratched around the cabin yard, bacon or sausage from Silas's stores, and more of that delicious cornbread or flapjacks. After breakfast, Silas would head out to check his trap lines or go hunting, while Amelia tackled the domestic tasks. The cabin had been well maintained, but showed signs of a winter's disuse. She swept and scrubbed, washed linens, and began working on the overgrown garden. At first, she worked with frantic energy, determined to prove her worth. But as the days passed and Silas consistently praised her efforts without criticism, she began to relax into the work. It felt good to use her body, to see tangible results from her labor. Meals became something she almost looked forward to. Silas was an excellent cook, and he seemed to take genuine pleasure in preparing food. He never commented on how much she ate, never made her feel judged. At dinner on the 5th night, when she reached for a second helping of venison stew, he simply smiled and passed her the bread. "This is really good," Amelia said. "Where did you learn to cook like this?" "My mother mostly," Silas said. "After my father died, it was just the two of us. She taught me everything, cooking, sewing, keeping a house. Said a man who could not take care of himself was not much of a man." He smiled at the memory. "She would have liked you, I think." "Why do you say that?" Silas considered the question. "She always said the measure of a person was how they treated those who could not benefit them. You are kind and hard-working, and you have not once complained about the primitive conditions up here. She would have respected that." Amelia felt her cheeks warm at the compliment. "I like it here," she admitted. "It is strange to say, but I feel more at peace in this isolated cabin than I ever did in Boston society." "That is because here you can just be yourself," Silas said. "No pretenses, no expectations, just work, food, sleep, and the mountains." It was true. Each day, Amelia felt a little more of her old anxiety falling away. She ate when she was hungry and worked when there was work to be done. Her body, which she had viewed for so long as an enemy, became simply a tool, strong enough to haul water, capable of kneading bread dough, improving at riding each time Silas took her out to explore the area. One afternoon, about 2 weeks into their arrangement, Amelia was working in the garden when she heard Silas call out. She looked up to see him emerging from the tree line with a large buck slung over his shoulders. The casual display of strength made her breath catch. He carried the animal as easily as another man might carry a sack of flour, his muscles flexing beneath his shirt. When he saw her watching, he grinned. "Good hunting today. We will eat well this week." Amelia helped him prepare the meat, a messy and slightly gruesome process that she would have found appalling a few weeks ago. Now it simply seemed practical. They worked together efficiently, Silas teaching her the best way to butcher and preserve the meat. "You're a quick learner," he said as she carefully trimmed a section of backstrap, "and you do not flinch at the hard parts. I appreciate that." "I grew up in the city, but my grandmother had a farm," Amelia said. "I spent summers there as a child. This brings back memories." They hung the meat to age and washed up together at the pump outside. Silas rolled up his sleeves, exposing forearms that were mapped with scars and old burns, the marks of a life lived hard and physical. "How did you end up becoming a mountain man?" Amelia asked. "You speak too well to have always lived in the wilderness." Silas chuckled. "My mother was a school teacher before she married. She insisted I learn proper grammar and read the classics, even while I was learning to trap and hunt. Said there was no reason a man could not be both educated and capable." He rinsed his hands and dried them on a cloth. "After she died, about 5 years ago, I just could not stand being around people anymore. Too many memories, too much noise. I bought this land and built the cabin, and I've been coming up here ever since. I go to town when I need supplies or want company, but this is home." "It is a good home," Amelia said, looking around at the meadow with its riot of wildflowers, the mountains rising beyond, the forest pressing close. "Beautiful and peaceful." "It is," Silas agreed. He looked at her with an expression she could not quite read. "I am glad you're here to share it with me, even if it is just for the summer." Something in his tone made Amelia's heart skip. She looked away quickly, suddenly flustered. "I should start dinner." That night, as they ate the fresh venison steak Silas had prepared, Amelia found herself watching him more closely. He had a good face, she decided, strong and honest. His hands, though large and rough, moved with surprising gentleness when he served her food or passed her the salt. And those amber eyes, she was discovering, could convey a remarkable range of emotion. "What?" Silas asked, catching her staring. "Nothing," Amelia said quickly. "I was just thinking that you are not at all what I expected when we first met." "What did you expect?" "Someone rougher, I suppose, less educated. You do not fit the usual image of a wilderness hermit." Silas laughed. "Should I start grunting instead of talking? Stop bathing?" "Please do not," Amelia said, and then blushed furiously at the implication that she had noticed whether he bathed. But Silas just grinned, clearly amused. "I will maintain my civilized habits then, if it pleases you." After dinner, instead of retreating to their separate sleeping areas as usual, they sat on the porch together, watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of gold and crimson. Silas whittled a piece of wood while Amelia mended one of his shirts that had torn on a bramble. "Can I ask you something personal?" Silas said after a while. "I suppose so." "Why did you agree to marry Pemberton in the first place? You clearly were not in love with him." Amelia set down her sewing and sighed. "Practicality mostly. After my parents died, I had nothing. My aunt made it clear I was a burden, and there were no good prospects in Boston. No man wanted a woman my size, and no fortune to compensate for it. Gerald's advertisement seemed like a chance at something different, a new start. I thought if I could just be useful enough, pleasant enough, maybe we could build a decent life together. I did not expect love, but I hoped for respect. And instead, he made you feel ashamed of yourself." "Yes." Amelia picked up the shirt again, needing something to do with her hands. "All my life, people have made me feel like I take up too much space, that my very existence is somehow an imposition. I thought if I could just be smaller, quieter, less visible, maybe I would be acceptable. But it never works. Does it? They always find something else to criticize." Silas was quiet for a long moment. "You know what I see when I look at you?" Amelia's breath caught. "What?" "Someone strong, capable, brave enough to take a chance on a stranger and run off into the mountains, smart enough to learn quickly and work hard, and beautiful, though you clearly do not believe that." Amelia's hands stilled on the fabric. "You do not have to say things like that." "I am not saying it to be kind," Silas said firmly. "I am saying it because it is true. You have a beautiful face, kind eyes, and a smile that lights up the whole room on the rare occasions you let yourself really smile. Your body is strong and healthy and exactly as it should be. The fact that narrow-minded people have convinced you otherwise is a damn crime." Tears pricked Amelia's eyes. "Silas." "I mean it, Amelia, every word." He set down his whittling and turned to face her fully. "I know we have only known each other a few weeks, but I hope in that time I have shown you that I am a man of my word. So believe me when I tell you that any man who cannot see your worth is a fool, not worth your tears." Amelia set the shirt aside and wiped her eyes. "Thank you. I do not know what to say." "You do not have to say anything." Silas stood and stretched. "I'm going to turn in. Big day tomorrow. I'm going to teach you to fish." That night, lying in her bed, Amelia replayed his words over and over. Beautiful, strong, capable. When had anyone ever described her that way? And the way he had said it with such conviction, as if it were simply a statement of fact rather than flattery. She fell asleep with a smile on her face and dreamed of amber eyes and strong hands and mountains that touched the sky. The fishing lesson the next day was a disaster in the most delightful way. Amelia had never held a fishing rod before, and her first several attempts at casting ended with the line tangled in trees or wrapped around herself. Silas was patient, standing behind her to guide her movements, and Amelia was acutely aware of his proximity, the heat of his body, the rumble of his voice as he gave instructions near her ear. "Relax your wrist," he said. "Let the rod do the work." On her 10th try, she finally managed a decent cast, and they both cheered when the line landed in the middle of the stream. Half an hour later, she caught her first fish, a small trout that fought valiantly before she reeled it in. "I did it!" she exclaimed, holding up the wriggling fish with delight. Silas's face split into a wide grin. "You did! Well done!" They caught 4 more fish that morning, enough for lunch and dinner. Silas showed her how to clean them, and together they cooked them over an open fire by the stream. Sitting on the bank with her feet dangling in the cool water, eating fresh trout with her fingers, Amelia felt something she had not experienced in years. Pure, uncomplicated joy. "This is perfect," she said. "This moment, right now. Perfect." Silas looked at her, and there was something in his expression that made her pulse quicken. "Yes," he said quietly. "It is." They rode back to the cabin in the afternoon heat, taking a different trail that led through a grove of aspens. The dappled light through the leaves created patterns on Silas's face, and Amelia found herself staring again. "You're doing it again," Silas said, amused. "Doing what?" "Watching me. You've been doing it a lot lately." Amelia felt her face flame. "I apologize. That is rude of me. I did not say I minded." Silas brought his horse alongside hers so they were riding side by side. "For the record, I have been watching you too." Amelia's breath caught. "Oh? Mm-hmm. I like watching you smile. Like watching the way you concentrate when you are working on something. Like how you talk to the chickens when you think I cannot hear you." "I do not talk to the chickens," Amelia protested, even though she absolutely did. Silas laughed. "You called the red one Henrietta and told her she was being stingy with her eggs." "Well, she was," Amelia said defensively, which only made Silas laugh harder. When they reached the cabin, Silas helped her down from her horse, his hands lingering at her waist a moment longer than strictly necessary. They stood close together, and Amelia could see golden flecks in his eyes, could smell the pleasant scent of pine and leather that clung to him. "Amelia," he said softly, and her name in his deep voice sent a shiver down her spine. "Yes? I need to tell you something." He took a breath. "These past few weeks having you here, it has been the best time I've had in years, maybe ever. You are smart and funny, and you work harder than anyone I have ever met. I look forward to waking up because I know you will be there, drinking coffee and probably humming while you make breakfast. I love how you get excited about little things, like catching a fish or seeing a deer in the meadow. And I think about you all day when I'm out in the woods, wondering what you are doing, eager to get back home to you." Amelia's heart was pounding so hard she could barely hear over the rush of blood in her ears. "Silas, I know it is too soon," he continued. "I know you came here to get away from one man's expectations, and I have no right to burden you with my feelings, but I am not good at pretending, and I wanted you to know. I care about you, Amelia, more than I probably should." For a long moment, Amelia could not speak. Then, acting on pure impulse, she rose on her toes and kissed him. It was awkward at first, unpracticed, but Silas made a sound low in his throat and wrapped his arms around her, pulling her close. His lips were warm and firm against hers, and when his hand came up to cup her face with surprising gentleness, Amelia melted into him. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Silas rested his forehead against hers. "Does this mean you feel the same way?" "Yes," Amelia whispered. "I did not want to admit it to myself, but yes. I think I started falling for you the day you caught me on that trail and made me eat. You have been nothing but kind and respectful and wonderful, and I have never felt safer or more valued than I do when I am with you." Silas smiled, and it was like the sun breaking through clouds. "Good. That is very good." They stood holding each other as the horses waited patiently nearby, the mountains standing sentinel around them. "What do we do now?" Amelia asked. "I am technically still engaged to Gerald, and the whole town thinks I am with a friend." "We tell the truth," Silas said. "Not today, not tomorrow, but when you are ready. We go back to Silver Creek and you tell Pemberton the engagement is off. If he makes trouble, I will deal with it. And then, if you want, we can build a life together. Here, in town, wherever you prefer. I just want to be with you." "I want that too," Amelia said. "But are you certain?" "I am not some delicate flower, Silas. I am large and plain and set in my ways." Silas pulled back enough to look her in the eyes. "You are not plain. You are beautiful. And I do not want a delicate flower. I want a partner, someone strong enough to build a life with me in these mountains, someone who can fish and garden and is not afraid of hard work, someone who makes me laugh and challenges me and fills this cabin with life. I want you, Amelia, exactly as you are." Amelia felt tears sliding down her cheeks, but they were good tears this time, tears of relief and joy and hope. "Then you have me, for as long as you will have me." Silas kissed her again, deeper this time, and Amelia felt herself falling into it, into him, into a future she had never dared to imagine. When they finally broke apart, he was grinning. "We should probably tend these horses before they decide to wander off," he said. "Probably," Amelia agreed, but neither of them moved for a long moment, too caught up in simply looking at each other. The rest of the day passed in a haze of joy and new awareness. Everything felt different now that their feelings were out in the open. When Silas brushed past her in the kitchen, she felt the contact like a spark. When she served him dinner, their eyes met and held, and the air between them felt charged with possibility. After dinner, they sat on the porch again, but this time Amelia sat close enough that their shoulders touched. Silas reached over and took her hand, his thumb tracing gentle circles on her palm. "Tell me about your dreams," he said. "What do you want from life?" Amelia thought about it. A few weeks ago, she would have said she just wanted to survive, to find some small corner of the world where she could exist without shame. But now, "I want a home," she said. "Not just a house, but a real home. Somewhere I belong, with someone who wants me there. I want to grow things, maybe keep bees like my grandmother did. I want to wake up in the morning feeling peaceful instead of anxious. And I want to matter to someone." "You matter to me," Silas said quietly, "more than I can properly express." "And you matter to me." Amelia squeezed his hand. "What about you? What do you want?" "Most of what I want I already have," Silas said. "This place, the freedom to live on my own terms. But I have been lonely, even if I did not want to admit it. I want someone to share this life with, someone to come home to. And I want children, eventually, if that is something you want too. I want to raise them the way my parents raised me, to be strong and kind and unafraid." "I would like that," Amelia said softly. "I always thought I would never have children, that no man would want to start a family with me. But with you, yes, I would like that very much." They sat in comfortable silence as the stars began to appear overhead, more stars than Amelia had ever seen in her life, the Milky Way stretching across the sky like a river of light. "It is beautiful here," she murmured. "It is," Silas agreed, "but it is better with you in it." The next few weeks passed in a golden haze. Amelia and Silas settled into their new dynamic, learning each other's rhythms and preferences. They worked together during the day, side by side in the garden or preparing food, and spent their evenings talking on the porch or taking walks through the meadow. Silas was affectionate in ways both large and small, a hand on her back as he passed, an arm around her shoulders as they sat together, kisses stolen in the kitchen or by the stream. He seemed to take pleasure in touching her, and Amelia gradually learned to accept and return his affection without the shame and self-consciousness that had always plagued her. One evening, as they were preparing dinner together, Silas came up behind her as she kneaded bread dough and wrapped his arms around her waist, pulling her back against his chest. "I love watching you work," he murmured against her ear. "You are so capable and confident." Amelia leaned back into his embrace. "I feel confident here, with you. You make me feel like I can do anything." "You can," Silas said. He pressed a kiss to her neck, and Amelia shivered. "You are remarkable, Amelia. I hope you are starting to believe that." She was, slowly. Every day with Silas chipped away at the years of shame and self-doubt. When she caught her reflection in the window or the mirror, she no longer saw just flaws. She saw someone who could ride and fish and keep a house and make a man like Silas MacKenna smile. They had been at the cabin for almost 2 months when Silas broached the subject of returning to town. "We are running low on some supplies I cannot make or hunt," he said one morning. "Salt, sugar, coffee. And I should check in with the land office about some paperwork. We could head down to Silver Creek for a few days if you are ready." Amelia's stomach clenched with anxiety. "I suppose we cannot avoid it forever." "We do not have to go if you do not want to," Silas said quickly. "I can go alone and be back in a few days." But Amelia shook her head. "No, you are right. It is time. I need to face Gerald and settle things properly." They spent the next day preparing for the trip, packing carefully and closing up the cabin. Amelia felt a pang of sadness as they rode away from the meadow. The cabin had become home in a way nowhere else ever had. "We will be back," Silas promised, seeing her expression. "This is not goodbye." The ride to Silver Creek took most of a day, and with each mile, Amelia felt her old anxieties creeping back. What would people say when they saw her? What would Gerald do? Would he make trouble for Silas? As if sensing her distress, Silas reached over and squeezed her hand. "Whatever happens, we face it together. You are not alone anymore, Amelia. Remember that." They arrived in Silver Creek in the late afternoon, and Amelia's heart sank when she saw people already stopping to stare. Silas rode directly to the boarding house where he had stayed before, helping her down from her horse in full view of anyone watching. "Let them look," he said quietly. "We have nothing to be ashamed of." The boarding house proprietor, a middle-aged woman named Mrs. Chen, greeted them with frank curiosity. "Mr. MacKenna, welcome back. And this must be Miss Hartford. We've all been wondering what happened to you." "I've been working for Mr. MacKenna at his cabin," Amelia said, lifting her chin, "as a housekeeper and cook." "I see." Mrs. Chen's expression was carefully neutral. "Mr. Pemberton has been quite concerned. He has asked about you several times." "I will speak with him," Amelia said. "Is he still at his house?" "I believe so. He will likely be at his office at this hour, though. The surveyor's office down by the bank." Silas and Amelia walked through town together, ignoring the whispers that followed them. When they reached the surveyor's office, a small building with dusty windows, Amelia paused. "Do you want me to come with you?" Silas asked. "No. This is something I need to do myself." She looked up at him. "But thank you for offering." Silas cupped her face in his hands and kissed her, right there on the street for anyone to see. "I will be at the general store getting supplies. Come find me when you are done." Amelia took a deep breath and pushed open the office door. Gerald looked up from his desk, and his expression cycled through surprise, relief, and anger in quick succession. "Amelia, where have you been? Your note said you were with a friend, but no one in town knew of any friend." "I was not with a friend, exactly," Amelia said, remaining standing near the door. "I have been working for Silas MacKenna at his cabin in the mountains." Gerald's face paled, then flushed red. "You have been alone with that man for 2 months? Do you have any idea what people will say? What this does to my reputation?" "I imagine they will say the same things they were already saying," Amelia replied calmly. "That I am large and inappropriate and unsuitable. Nothing new. This is not a joke, Amelia. You have ruined yourself, and by extension, me. How am I supposed to explain this? You do not have to explain anything, because I am ending our engagement. I will write to you formally. But I wanted to tell you in person first. I am sorry, Gerald. But we would not have been happy together. You deserve someone you can be proud of, and I deserve someone who does not make me feel ashamed of myself." Gerald stood abruptly, his chair scraping across the floor. "Is this about that mountain man? Have you been carrying on with him?" "I have been falling in love with him," Amelia said, "and yes, I intend to marry him if he asks me. But that is not why I'm ending things with you. I am doing this because I finally realize that I deserve better than a man who looks at me with disappointment." "You will regret this," Gerald said coldly. "You think you can just run off and play house in the wilderness? What happens when he tires of you, when he realizes what everyone else already knows?" "And what is that?" Amelia asked, though she knew she should not rise to the bait. "That you are too much, too big, too demanding, too proud for your own good. You will end up alone, Amelia, because no decent man wants a woman he cannot be proud of." The words should have hurt. A few months ago they would have devastated her, but Amelia had spent the summer learning to see herself through Silas's eyes, and Gerald's cruelty could not touch her the way it once might have. "If that is what you truly believe, then I am even more certain I am making the right choice," she said. "Goodbye, Gerald. I hope you find someone who makes you happy." She walked out before he could respond, her heart pounding, but her head high. The walk to the general store felt like running a gauntlet, with curious eyes following her every step, but Amelia kept moving. Silas was inside, talking with the proprietor about ammunition. When he saw her, his face lit up, then became concerned as he read her expression. "Are you all right?" "I am fine," Amelia said, and realized it was true. "It is done. I ended it." Silas set down the box he was holding and crossed to her, pulling her into his arms right there in the middle of the store. "I'm proud of you. That could not have been easy." "It was not," Amelia admitted, "but it was necessary." "Excuse me," said the proprietor, a man named Mr. Stevens, who Amelia vaguely remembered from that first disastrous dinner. "Am I to understand that you two are together?" "Yes," Silas said firmly, not releasing Amelia. "Miss Hartford and I are courting, with the intention to marry. If that offends your sensibilities, I can take my business elsewhere." Mr. Stevens held up his hands. "No offense taken. Just wanted to understand the situation. And for what it is worth, Miss Hartford, a lot of folks in town thought Pemberton was not good enough for you anyway. Too cold, too concerned with appearances. Amelia blinked in surprise. Really? Really, Mr. Stevens confirmed. You want my opinion? You're better off with a man who looks at you the way McKenna does, like you hung the moon and stars. They finished purchasing supplies, and Silas insisted on buying Amelia a new dress from the dry goods store next door, a pretty blue calico that the proprietor assured her was the latest style. You do not have to buy me things, Amelia protested. I want to, Silas said. Let me spoil you a little. As they walked back toward the boarding house, laden with packages, they passed the hotel. The smell of dinner drifting from the dining room made Amelia's stomach growl, and Silas looked at her with sudden determination. Let's eat here tonight, he said. Silas, I do not know if that is a good idea. People will talk. Let them talk. I want to take you to dinner, show you off properly. Will you let me? Amelia thought about it. The old fear was still there, the anxiety about being watched while she ate. But she looked at Silas's earnest face and thought about how far she had come. She had spent the summer eating meals with him, learning to nourish her body without shame. Why should she hide now? All right, she said. Yes, let's have dinner. They dropped off their packages at the boarding house and returned to the hotel dining room. It was early evening, and the room was already filling with diners. Conversations faltered as they entered, and Amelia felt the familiar weight of stares. But Silas kept his hand firmly on the small of her back, guiding her to a table by the window. He pulled out her chair with exaggerated courtesy, then took the seat across from her. Good evening, the waitress said, approaching with menus. Nice to see you again, Mr. McKenna, Miss Hartford. What is good tonight, Lily? Silas asked, apparently familiar with the staff. We have pot roast with vegetables, fried chicken, and fresh trout, and Mrs. Patterson made her peach cobbler for dessert. We will have the pot roast, Silas said, not even looking at the menu. And bring us plenty. We have been eating camp food for weeks and are ready for a proper feast. When Lily left, Amelia looked at Silas nervously. A feast? A feast, Silas confirmed. I want to enjoy a good meal with the woman I love, and I want everyone in this room to see that I am not ashamed of you or of us. So we are going to eat, and we are going to enjoy it, and we are not going to care what anyone thinks. Amelia felt tears prick her eyes. You love me? Silas reached across the table and took her hand. I love you. I've been wanting to say it for weeks, but I was waiting for the right moment. Is this the right moment, in a crowded dining room with half the town watching? Amelia laughed, tears spilling over. It is perfect, and I love you too. The food arrived in generous portions, thick slices of pot roast with rich gravy, mashed potatoes, roasted carrots and onions, and fresh bread with butter. It smelled heavenly, and Amelia's stomach growled in anticipation. She picked up her fork and hesitated, old habits dying hard. Then she looked at Silas, who was watching her with steady, loving eyes, and she took a proper bite. The food was delicious. Amelia ate slowly, savoring each mouthful, and Silas kept up a steady stream of conversation that made her laugh and forget to be self-conscious. When she cleaned her plate, he smiled approvingly. Want more? He asked. I'm actually quite satisfied, Amelia said, but I would not say no to some of that peach cobbler. Silas flagged down Lily and ordered 2 generous servings of dessert. When it arrived, warm and fragrant with cinnamon, topped with cream, Amelia dug in without hesitation. This is incredible, she said. Better than my cooking? Silas asked, pretending to be offended. Different. Your cooking tastes like home. This tastes like celebration. Good, Silas said, because this is a celebration of you being brave enough to leave Pemberton, of us being together, of you finally allowing yourself to enjoy a meal without guilt. Amelia looked around the dining room. People were still watching, but the whispers seemed less malicious now, more curious. And honestly, she found she did not care as much as she thought she would. Let them watch. Let them see that she was happy, that she was loved, that she could eat a full meal and hold her head high. When they finished, Silas paid the bill and offered her his arm. They walked back to the boarding house through the warm evening, and Amelia felt lighter than she had in years. Mrs. Chen met them at the door. I have 2 rooms prepared for you, as requested. Thank you, Silas said. He walked Amelia to her door, then took both her hands in his. I know we are not married yet, but I want to do this properly. Court you the right way, with respect and propriety. I appreciate that, Amelia said, though I will miss falling asleep to the sound of you moving around in the loft. Silas smiled. I will miss that too, but we have time. All the time in the world. He kissed her good night, a sweet, lingering kiss that promised more to come, and Amelia went to bed with a smile on her face. The next morning, Silas knocked on her door early. Get dressed, we have somewhere to be. Where are we going? You will see. He led her through town to a small white church at the edge of the settlement. A minister was waiting on the steps, a kind-faced man in his 50s. Mr. MacKenna, he said warmly, and this must be Miss Hartford. Reverend Thompson, Silas said, thank you for meeting with us. Inside the small church, Silas took Amelia's hands. I know we have only known each other a few months, and by all rights we should wait longer. But I am not a patient man, and I know what I want. Amelia Hartford, will you marry me? Amelia's breath caught. Now? Today? If you are willing. I spoke to Reverend Thompson yesterday when I was in town. He is willing to perform the ceremony whenever we are ready. But if you want to wait, if you want a big wedding with all the trimmings, I will wait as long as you need. Amelia thought about it. Did she want a traditional wedding with all the fuss and spectacle? Or did she want to simply commit herself to this man who had shown her more love and respect in a few months than she had experienced in her entire life? I do not need a big wedding, she said. I just need you. Silas's face lit up like sunrise over the mountains. Is that a yes? Yes, Amelia said, laughing through happy tears. Yes, I will marry you. The ceremony was simple and beautiful. Reverend Thompson spoke about love and partnership, about building a life together on a foundation of respect and faith. When Silas slipped a simple gold band onto Amelia's finger, his hands were shaking slightly, and she realized he was as nervous and moved as she was. I, Silas MacKenna, take you, Amelia Hartford, to be my lawfully wedded wife, he said, his deep voice steady and sure. I promise to love you, honor you, protect you, and cherish you for all the days of my life. I will build you a home and fill it with laughter. I will work beside you and support your dreams, and I will never, ever make you feel like you are anything less than the most precious person in my world. Amelia's eyes filled with tears as she repeated her own vows, promising to love and honor him, to be his partner and companion through whatever life brought them. When Reverend Thompson pronounced them husband and wife, Silas pulled her into his arms and kissed her deeply, not caring that they were in a church, that the minister was watching with an amused smile. Hello, Mrs. MacKenna, Silas murmured against her lips. Hello, husband, Amelia replied, and the word felt like magic on her tongue. They signed the marriage certificate with Reverend Thompson and his wife serving as witnesses, and walked out of the church into bright morning sunlight as man and wife. What now? Amelia asked. Now, Silas said, we celebrate, properly. He took her back to the hotel and requested a private dining room. The manager, seeing the glow on their faces and the ring on Amelia's finger, quickly agreed. We just got married, Silas announced, and I want to give my wife a proper wedding feast. The private dining room was small but elegant, with a table set for two and windows overlooking the main street. Silas ordered everything the kitchen had to offer: roast beef, fried chicken, fresh fish, potatoes prepared 3 different ways, vegetables, bread, pies, cakes, and pastries. This is too much food, Amelia protested, as the waitstaff brought in platter after platter. No, nonsense, Silas said. This is exactly right. I wanted to order a feast just for the two of us, where you can eat as much or as little as you want without anyone watching or judging, where we can celebrate our marriage surrounded by good food and privacy. Amelia looked at the spread before them and felt her throat tighten with emotion. This was what he had been planning, she realized, not just the marriage, but this moment. A feast ordered just for them, in a private room where she would not have to worry about prying eyes or critical whispers. Thank you, she said softly. This is perfect. They ate slowly, sampling everything, feeding each other bites of different dishes and laughing like children. Silas told stories about his adventures in the mountains, and Amelia shared memories of her childhood on her grandmother's farm. They talked about their plans for the future, where they would live, how they would build their life together. "I want to make the cabin bigger," Silas said. "Add another room or two. I want space for children eventually, and for you to have a proper kitchen." "I want to expand the garden," Amelia said, "and maybe get more chickens, some goats for milk. I want to learn to make cheese like my grandmother did." "We can do all of that," Silas promised. "Whatever you want, we will build it together." When they finally could not eat another bite, they sat together on the small sofa in the corner of the room, Amelia curled against Silas's side, his arm around her shoulders. "Are you happy?" he asked. "Happy. Happier than I ever imagined I could be," Amelia said honestly. "A few months ago, I was starving myself to please people who would never be pleased. I thought my life was basically over. And now I am married to the most wonderful man I have ever met, with a home in the mountains and a future full of possibilities. It feels like a dream." "Not a dream," Silas said, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Just life, the way it is supposed to be, full of good food and honest work and people who love you exactly as you are." They spent one more night in Silver Creek, this time in the same room as a properly married couple, and Amelia discovered new depths to love and intimacy that left her breathless and amazed. Silas was tender and patient, treating her with a reverence that made her feel beautiful and cherished. The next morning, they loaded up their supplies and headed back to the cabin. Amelia felt none of the anxiety that had plagued her arrival in town. She rode with her head high, wearing her new dress and the gold band on her finger, Silas's wife in fact and name. The ride back to the high country felt like a homecoming. When the cabin came into view, nestled in its meadow with the mountains rising behind it, Amelia felt tears of joy prick her eyes. "Welcome home, Mrs. MacKenna," Silas said, helping her down from her horse. "Home," Amelia repeated, and the word had never sounded sweeter. They settled back into their routines, but everything felt different now, richer and fuller. They worked side by side during the days, expanding the garden and starting plans for the additions to the cabin. Silas taught Amelia to hunt and trap, and she proved to be a surprisingly good shot with a rifle. She taught him some of her grandmother's recipes, and together they experimented with preserving food for the winter. The summer faded into fall, the aspens turning gold and the air growing crisp. They made several trips to town for supplies and to file the paperwork for Silas to officially add Amelia to the deed for his land. Each time, Amelia noticed that the whispers and stares had diminished. People were getting used to seeing them together, accepting them as a couple. One evening in late October, as they sat by the fire after dinner, Silas pulled Amelia onto his lap. "I have been thinking," he said, "about winter." "What about it?" "It gets harsh up here. We could stay, we have enough supplies. But I thought maybe for our first winter as a married couple, we might want to be closer to civilization. I own a small house in town, a place I stay when I'm doing business. We could spend the winter there, close to people and supplies, and come back up here in the spring." Amelia considered it. Part of her wanted to stay in their mountain refuge, away from prying eyes and judgment. But another part, the part that was learning to be brave, thought that maybe it was time to build a life in the world, not apart from it. "I think that sounds nice," she said. "We can have the best of both worlds. Summers here, winters in town." "Exactly," Silas kissed her nose. "And who knows, maybe by next summer we will have a little one to bring up here with us." Amelia's breath caught. They had not been preventing pregnancy, but she had not dared to hope yet. "Would you want that? A baby so soon?" "I would love that," Silas said. "I meant what I said before. I want a family with you, Amelia, as many children as we are blessed with." As it turned out, Amelia's monthly courses were already late, though she had been attributing it to the change in altitude and routine. By mid-November, when they had moved to Silas's house in town for the winter, there was no denying it. She was expecting. Silas was overjoyed, immediately becoming even more protective and solicitous than he already was. He insisted she rest more, eat more, take no risks. Amelia bore his fussing with amused patience, secure in the knowledge that it came from love. The house in town was small but comfortable, and Amelia set about making it a proper home. She sewed curtains and made quilts, learned the names of the neighbors, and began attending church services with Silas. People were curious about her, but most were friendly once they got to know her. She became particularly close with Mrs. Chen from the boarding house, who proved to be a font of practical wisdom about pregnancy and childbirth. And one day, when Amelia was about 4 months along and just starting to show, she ran into Gerald Pemberton on the street. He stopped, clearly uncomfortable, and tipped his hat. "Mrs. MacKenna, I heard about your marriage. Congratulations." "Thank you," Amelia said graciously. "I hope you're doing well." "Well enough. I'm engaged, actually, to a woman from Helena, a banker's daughter." "That's wonderful, Gerald. I'm happy for you." He glanced at her midsection, where her pregnancy was becoming visible, and something like regret crossed his face. "You look well. Happy." "I am," Amelia said simply. "I hope you will be too." They parted cordially, and Amelia realized she felt nothing but relief that she had not ended up with him. He was not a bad man, just not the right man for her. Winter passed in a blur of domesticity. Silas took work helping at the sawmill and doing odd jobs around town, insisting on building up their savings for the baby. Amelia sewed tiny clothes and blankets, read every book she could find on motherhood, and grew round and healthy as her pregnancy progressed. In April, as the snow began to melt and the first green shoots appeared, Amelia went into labor. It was long and difficult, but Silas never left her side, holding her hand and whispering encouragement. When their son finally arrived, red-faced and squalling, Silas wept openly. "He is perfect," he said, cradling the tiny bundle with hands that seemed impossibly large. "Absolutely perfect." They named him Thomas after Silas's father, and Amelia fell in love all over again, watching her strong, capable husband transform into a tender, doting father. He changed diapers without complaint, walked the floor for hours when Thomas was fussy, and sang lullabies in his deep, rumbling voice. When Thomas was 6 weeks old and spring had fully arrived, they made the journey back to the cabin. Amelia rode with the baby strapped to her chest in a sling Silas had fashioned, and the trip that had once seemed arduous now felt like a pilgrimage to their true home. The meadow was bursting with wildflowers, and the cabin stood waiting for them, solid and welcoming. Silas had come up a week earlier to open it up and make repairs, so everything was ready. "Welcome home, little one," Amelia whispered to Thomas as they entered. "This is where you will learn to walk and grow strong." That summer was different from the last, busier and noisier with a baby to care for, but no less beautiful. Amelia learned to balance motherhood with the work of maintaining their home, often wearing Thomas in his sling as she worked in the garden or prepared meals. Silas doted on his son, taking him on short walks through the meadow, talking to him about the mountains and the animals as if the infant could understand. One evening in late July, exactly a year after Amelia had first arrived in Montana Territory, they sat on the porch watching the sunset. Thomas was asleep in Amelia's arms, and Silas had his arm around her shoulders. "Do you ever think about what your life would have been like if you had stayed with Pemberton?" Silas asked. Amelia considered it. "Sometimes. I think I would have been miserable, constantly trying to be smaller, quieter, less than I am. Eventually, I probably would have done what your mother did, wasted away trying to please people who could not be pleased." "I am glad you did not," Silas said fiercely. "I am glad you were brave enough to take a chance on a stranger and come up to these mountains." "I am glad you were kind enough to see past the shame I had built around myself," Amelia replied. "You saved my life, Silas, not just by feeding me that day on the trail, but by showing me that I could be loved exactly as I am." "You saved mine too," Silas said. "This cabin was beautiful before, but it was lonely. Now it is full of life and love and the sound of our son babbling. You gave me the family I always wanted." They sat in peaceful silence as the stars began to emerge, their son sleeping peacefully between them. The years that followed were full and rich. Thomas grew into a sturdy, adventurous boy who loved the mountains as much as his father. When he was 2, Amelia gave birth to a daughter they named Sarah, who had her mother's dark hair and her father's amber eyes. 3 years later came another son, Michael, and finally, when Amelia was 31, twin girls who they named Grace and Hope. The cabin grew with their family. Silas added 2 more bedrooms, a larger kitchen, and a proper bathing room. The garden expanded to include vegetables, herbs, and a small orchard. They acquired goats, more chickens, and even a cow. Every summer they lived in their mountain home, and every winter they returned to town where the children could attend school and Amelia could be part of the community. She became known in Silver Creek as a woman of capability and kindness, someone who would help a neighbor without hesitation and who could be counted on in a crisis. The whispers about her size had long since faded, replaced by respect for the life she had built. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Silas surprised her with a special dinner. He had been planning it for weeks, she discovered, enlisting the children's help to keep it secret. When Amelia came in from the garden that evening, the table was set with their best dishes, wildflowers in a jar as a centerpiece, and a feast laid out that reminded her of that first private celebration in the hotel. "What is all this?" she asked, laughing. "This," Silas said, pulling out her chair, "is me recreating our wedding feast. I wanted to remind you of that day, when I ordered all this food just for the two of us so you could eat without shame or judgment." Amelia felt tears prick her eyes as she sat down. The children, ranging from 9-year-old Thomas to the 1-year-old twins, watched with excitement. "But we are not alone this time," she pointed out. "No," Silas agreed, taking his seat at the head of the table with a child on either side. "This time, we have our family with us, and that makes it even better." They ate together, the table full of noise and laughter and the happy chaos of children. Amelia looked around at her family, at the home they had built together, and felt overwhelming gratitude. After dinner, when the children were in bed and she and Silas were alone on the porch, he pulled her close. "Do you remember what you said to me that first night at the cabin?" he asked, "about wanting a home where you belonged?" "I do. Have we built that? Do you feel like you belong here?" Amelia looked out at the meadow bathed in moonlight, at the mountains rising in silver and shadow, at the cabin behind them, full of sleeping children. She thought about the life they had created together, built on a foundation of mutual respect and love, nourished by honest work and genuine affection. "I do not just belong here," she said. "I belong with you. This is not just my home. You are my home, Silas. You and our children and this life we have built together. Every single day I'm grateful that you saw past my shame and showed me what love really looks like." Silas kissed her, slow and sweet, a kiss that spoke of 10 years of marriage and a lifetime of love still to come. "I'm grateful too," he said. "Grateful that you were brave enough to say yes when I asked you to run away to the mountains with me. Grateful for every meal we have shared, every sunset we have watched, every moment we have built together." They sat together under the stars, the same stars that had witnessed their first nervous conversations, their tentative courtship, their growing love. Amelia thought about the woman she had been when she first arrived in Montana territory, afraid, ashamed, barely able to eat in public without crippling anxiety. That woman felt like a stranger now. In her place was someone stronger, someone who had learned that her worth was not determined by her size or by the opinions of small-minded people. Someone who could work hard, love fiercely, and raise her children to be strong and kind and unafraid. "Tell me what you are thinking," Silas said softly. "I'm thinking about how far I have come," Amelia said, "and how none of it would have been possible without you. You did not just feed me that day on the trail, Silas. You nourished my soul. You taught me to take up space without apology, to eat without shame, to believe that I deserved love and respect and happiness. You always deserved those things," Silas said. "I just helped you see it." The years continued to pass in their established rhythm. The children grew and flourished, each developing their own personality and interests. Thomas became an expert tracker and hunter like his father. Sarah showed a talent for cooking and could create meals that rivaled anything Amelia or Silas could make. Michael was fascinated by the natural world, collecting specimens and asking endless questions. The twins, Grace and Hope, were inseparable and adventurous, always getting into some scrape or another. Amelia and Silas grew older together, their hair graying and faces lining, but their love never diminishing. They still sat on the porch every evening, still found reasons to steal kisses in the kitchen, still looked at each other with the wonder of people who could not quite believe their good fortune. When Thomas turned 18 and announced he was courting a girl from town, a quiet, sweet young woman named Elizabeth, Amelia gave him the same advice Silas had once followed. Treat her with respect. Never make her feel ashamed of who she is. Love her for exactly who she is, not who you think she should be. Thomas smiled. Just like Pa loves you. Exactly like that. One fall evening, when the children were all in bed and Amelia and Silas were alone, he pulled out an old journal. I have been writing in this since the day we met, he said, recording our life together. I thought someday our children and grandchildren would want to know our story. Amelia took the journal reverently and opened it. The first entry was dated the day he had met her on the trail. Found a woman starving herself today, it read. Afraid to eat, because the world has convinced her she does not deserve to nourish herself. Something about her broke my heart. I know it is crazy, but I invited her to come to my cabin for the summer. I think she said yes because she has no other options, but I am going to show her that she is worth beyond what small-minded people think. I am going to teach her to live without shame. Amelia read further, through entries that chronicled their growing affection, their marriage, the birth of each child. Through all of it, Silas's love and respect for her shone through every word. This is beautiful, she said, tears streaming down her face. Thank you for recording our story. It is not finished yet, Silas said. We have many more years to fill these pages. And they did. They watched all their children grow up and marry and have children of their own. The cabin was eventually passed down to Thomas and Elizabeth, while Silas and Amelia spent more time in town, enjoying their role as grandparents. But they still visited the mountains every summer, teaching their grandchildren to fish and hunt and appreciate the wild beauty of the high country. On their 40th wedding anniversary, surrounded by children and grandchildren, Silas raised a glass in a toast. To my wife, he said, his voice still strong despite his 70 years. The bravest woman I have ever known. She ran away to the mountains with a stranger, built a life from nothing, and taught me what real love looks like. Every day with her has been a gift. Amelia raised her own glass, looking at the man who had saved her in more ways than one. And to my husband, who saw me when I was invisible, valued me when I felt worthless, and loved me when I thought I was unlovable. You gave me everything I ever wanted, a home, a family, and the freedom to be myself. Their grandchildren cheered, and the celebration continued long into the night. Later, when the last guest had gone and they were alone, Silas and Amelia sat together on the porch of their townhouse, watching the stars. Do you ever regret it? Silas asked. Giving up the life you could have had back east? Amelia laughed. Not for a single moment. That life would have destroyed me. This life, the one we built together, saved me. We saved each other, Silas corrected gently. Yes, Amelia agreed. We did. They sat in comfortable silence, holding hands like the young couple they had once been. The years had changed them in many ways, but the essentials remained the same. Their love, their respect, their commitment to building a life together based on honesty and acceptance. Amelia thought back to that first feast Silas had ordered for them, the meal he had planned so she could eat without shame. She thought about all the meals they had shared since then, all the food prepared with love and consumed with gratitude. Food had once been a source of shame for her, a constant reminder of her perceived failures. But Silas had taught her that eating was not shameful. It was necessary and good and even joyful. He had taught her to nourish herself, body and soul, without apology. And in doing so, he had given her everything. As the stars wheeled overhead and the mountain wind carried the scent of pine and sage, Amelia Hartford MacKenna looked at her husband of 40 years and felt nothing but contentment. Her life had not turned out the way she had once imagined, back when she was a frightened young woman stepping off a stagecoach in a dusty frontier town. It had turned out so much better. Silas squeezed her hand, and she squeezed back, a silent conversation that needed no words. They had built something rare and precious, a love that nourished rather than diminished, that celebrated rather than criticized, that saw the person behind the surface and loved what it found there. Ready for bed? Silas asked eventually. In a minute, Amelia said. I want to sit here with you a bit longer. So they sat, the mountain man and his bride, grown old together but still bound by the love that had saved them both. Above them, the stars shone down the same as they had that first summer in the high country, when a feast ordered just for two had changed both their lives forever. and in the morning they would wake together and begin another day, filled with the simple joys of a life well lived, good food, honest work, family gathered close, and love that had only deepened with time. It was exactly the happily ever after that Amelia had never dared to dream possible, and more than she could have ever hoped for.